Most defense contractors sign contracts without reading the cybersecurity clauses carefully. Then the assessment happens, or a breach happens, and they find out they accepted obligations they never implemented. The clause was in the contract the entire time. DFARS 252.204-7012 does not ask you to get ready for cybersecurity requirements. It requires you to meet them right now as a condition of contract performance. If you are processing, storing, or transmitting controlled unclassified information and you have not read the clause, you are already out of compliance. This is the CMMC Advisor. This video is for IT managers, security managers, compliance leads, and consultants who are doing the actual contract work, reading solicitations, building compliance programs, and advising subcontractors. The question we are answering: which DFARS clauses, Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement clauses, actually trigger your cybersecurity obligations? What do they require, and how do you recognize them when they appear in a contract? If you're in the DoD supply chain, this is foundational knowledge. Let's work through it systematically. DFARS clauses are the legal mechanism DoD uses to push cybersecurity requirements down through the supply chain. They are written into contracts and subcontracts, and when they appear, they create enforceable obligations. The stakes are straightforward. If your contract includes DFARS 252.204-7012, you are contractually required to implement the 110 security requirements in NIST Special Publication 800-171. NIST 800-171, National Institute of Standards and Technology Special Publication 800-171, is the foundational control set for protecting controlled unclassified information, or CUI, in non-federal systems. Failing to implement those controls is not just a compliance gap. It is a potential False Claims Act exposure, because contractors who certify compliance and are not compliant can face significant civil liability. And with CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, DoD is now moving toward third-party verification of those same requirements. So, the clause that looked like boilerplate in your contract is now connected to your ability to bid on DoD work at all. Subcontractors face the same exposure. When a prime contractor flows down a DFARS cybersecurity clause, the subcontractor accepts the same obligations. And many subcontractors do not realize this until they are mid-performance on a contract. Understanding which clauses matter and what each one actually requires is how you stay in front of this. There are several DFARS clauses you need to recognize on site. The most important is DFARS 252.204-7012, Safeguarding Covered Defense Information and Cyber Incident Reporting. This clause has 3 core obligations. First, adequate security. You must implement the 110 controls in NIST SP 800-171 on any system that processes, stores, or transmits covered defense information, which includes CUI. Second, cyber incident reporting. If a breach or cyber incident occurs, you must report it to DoD within 72 hours through the DIBnet portal, the Defense Industrial Base Network portal, and preserve forensic images of affected systems. Third, flowdown. You must include this clause in subcontracts where the subcontractor may handle covered defense information. That flowdown obligation is not discretionary, it is mandatory. The next clause to know is DFARS 252.204-7119, Notice of NIST SP 800-171 DoD Assessment Requirements. This clause requires you to have a current NIST SP 800-171 DoD assessment on record in the Supplier Performance Risk System, SPRS, before contract award. SPRS is the DoD portal where contractors self-report their 800-171 implementation score on a scale from -203 to 110. Without a current score in SPRS, you are not eligible for award on contracts that include this clause. The companion clause is DFARS 252.204-7020, NIST SP 800-171 DoD Assessment Requirements. This clause gives DoD the right to conduct a government-led assessment of your 800-171 implementation, a medium or high assessment, and requires your cooperation. Together, 7019 and 7020 are almost always included together in solicitations. Then there is DFARS 252.204-7021, Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Requirements. This is the CMMC clause itself. When this clause appears in a contract or solicitation, it specifies the CMMC level required, level 1, 2, or 3, and the scope of the assessment. For most contractors handling CUI, the required level will be CMMC Level 2, which maps directly to the 110 controls of NIST SP 800-171. Level 2 requires a third-party assessment by a C3PAO, a CMMC third-party assessment organization, unless a specific exception applies. This clause also carries a flow-down requirement for subcontractors. Finally, be aware of DFARS 252.239-7010, Cloud Computing Services. If you or your subcontractors use cloud services to process DoD data, this clause requires that cloud providers meet FedRAMP, Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program, moderate baseline at minimum, or equivalent security requirements. This has direct implications for how you scope your system boundary and document third-party services in your SSP, your System Security Plan. These clauses do not work in isolation. They stack. A single contract can include 7012, 7019, 7020, and 7021 simultaneously. Your job is to read the contract, identify which clauses are present, and map each one to its specific obligations. The first and most common mistake: treating 252.204.712 as a future obligation. Contractors read the clause, note the NIST 800-171 requirement, and assume it is something to work toward. It is not. The moment you sign a contract containing 252.204.712 and your system touches covered defense information, you are required to have adequate security in place. The second mistake: not recognizing when a clause has been flowed down. Prime contractors often use their own subcontract templates. The DFARS clause number may not appear verbatim. It may be paraphrased, incorporated by reference, or attached as an exhibit. As a subcontractor, you need to read the full agreement, including attachments, and ask directly, is 252.204.712 or 7021 included or incorporated? If CUI is involved, assume the answer is yes and verify. The third mistake: submitting an SPRS score without supporting documentation. Many contractors have a score in SPRS. Far fewer have a complete NIST SP 800-171 self-assessment that is documented, dated, and tied to a system boundary. In a government assessment, a medium or high, under 7020, the assessor will ask to see the assessment methodology, the SSP, and the POA&M, the Plan of Action and Milestones, that supports the score. If the score was entered without documentation, that is a significant finding. The fourth mistake: scoping the assessment boundary too broadly or too narrowly. Contractors who scope too broadly pull in systems and cloud services that carry full 800-171 compliance obligations unnecessarily. Contractors who scope too narrowly exclude systems that legitimately process CUI and create gaps that an assessor will identify. Your scope needs to be defensible, documented in your SSP, tied to your data flows, and consistent with how CUI actually moves through your environment. The fifth mistake: ignoring the 72-hour incident reporting window under 7012. Many contractors have no incident response procedure that accounts for this timeline. If a breach occurs, 72 hours is a very short window to identify, scope, contain, and report. If you do not have a documented incident response plan that includes the DIBnet reporting step, you will miss it under pressure. Here are 6 concrete steps to take. 1. Pull your active contracts and every subcontract agreement. Search for the clause numbers 252.204-7012, 7019, 7020, and 7021. Document which contracts include which clauses. This is your compliance trigger map. 2. If you are a subcontractor, request the full flow-down language from your prime. Do not assume. Ask specifically whether 252.204-7012 and 7021 apply to your scope of work. 3. Verify your SPRS entry. Log into SPRS and confirm your score is current, matches your documented self-assessment, and reflects your current system boundary. A stale or undocumented score is a liability. 4. Review your system security plan boundary against your clause obligations. Every system that processes, stores, or transmits covered defense information under a 7012 contract must be within scope. Confirm your cloud services are documented and assessed for FedRAMP equivalency if 252.239-7010 applies. 5. Review your incident response plan specifically for the 72-hour reporting requirement under 7012. Confirm your plan names the DIBnet portal, assigns a reporting owner, and defines the evidence preservation steps required. 6. For any contract that includes 252.204.7021, identify your required CMMC level and timeline. If Level 2 is required and a C3 PAO assessment is required, initiate scoping discussions now. Assessment scheduling lead times can be significant. The DFARS cybersecurity clauses are not background noise in your contract. They are the mechanism that defines your obligations, what you must implement, when you must report, who must be assessed, and what you must flow to your subcontractors. Reading them carefully is not optional. It is part of contract performance. If you want the DFARS Cybersecurity Clause Recognition Guide, a breakdown of each clause, its obligations, its flow-down requirements, and the evidence artifacts it drives, drop DFARS in the comments, and we will send it your way. The link is also in the description. Either way works. DFARS in the comments. One important note: CMMC requirements and DFARS clause language evolve. Always verify the specifics against current official guidance from the DoD and the CMCC accreditation body before making compliance decisions. Know what you signed. Implement what you owe. That is how you stay in the program.